Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is the 1997 fantasy horror film, Wishmaster. Now, Wishmaster was directed by Robert Kurtzman, who is one of the founding members of K&B Effects, along with Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger. And he would go on to direct movies like The Rage, Buried Alive, and Deadly Impact, and right before this movie, he actually wrote the original story for Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn. The movie was also written by Peter Atkins, who prior to this wrote Hellraiser 2, Hellraiser 3, and Hellraiser Bloodline, and the film was executive produced by Wes Craven. Although it should be noted that this was a period where they were basically slapping Wes Craven's name on a lot of movies, because Wes Craven even admitted that he basically sold his name off, and producers were just like slapping his name on just random different horror films, like Wes Craven presents Carnival of Souls, because right after this they did a remake of Carnival of Souls that Wes Craven was an executive producer for. You had Wes Craven presents Dracula 2000, and again, a lot of these movies Wes Craven didn't really have a lot to do with. Again, they just kind of put his name on the title. Now, in a way, you could almost look at Wishmaster as sort of a cross between the W.W. Jacobs story, The Monkey's Paw, and Goethe's Faust. Now, I have Wishmaster on the same DVD as the sequel, Wishmaster 2. Now, the movie is about an evil genie, or technically a Djinn, which is really where we got the idea of genies from. Now, actual Djinn mythology is honestly pretty complex and really fascinating. Now, I am no expert on this by any means, and I'm probably not going to do the actual folklore justice, so anybody who knows more about this than me, feel free to correct me on anything I get wrong. But from what I understand, jinns are creatures from Arabic folklore. Now, they predate Islam, but they actually have become a very important part of Islamic culture, like they actually are mentioned in the Quran. But from what I understand, in the Islamic belief systems, jinn are supposed to be a race of beings that God created alongside angels before he created mankind. They basically take on the same roles that demons or the devil take on in Christian folklore, but whereas most Christians believe Satan and his demons to be fallen angels, in Islamic belief systems, the creatures that we call demons are actually the Djinn. And from what I understand, Djinn are not inherently good or evil, but like humans, they have free will, and some are good, some are bad, some serve God, and some are against God. And believe it or not, to this day, there are people in Islamic cultures who still believe in the Djinn. Like, Djinn are sort of blamed on, like, if there's some unexplainable event, or some unexplainable tragedy, or if a house is apparently haunted, they'll say it's actually the Djinn causing this. Like I said, it's a very complex mythology that I know I'm not doing justice to, but to be completely honest, I don't think this movie really does justice to it either. That being said, I still love the shit out of this movie. This is one of the most fun horror films from the 1990s, in my opinion. So, the plot of Wishmaster is it begins in ancient Persia, where an evil Djinn tries to destroy the earth, but a wizard manages to trap him inside of a magic opal. We then cut ahead to present-day America, and we find out that in the time since then, this opal has been hidden inside the statue of an ancient god called Ahura Mazda, and yes, I know I'm probably butchering the name of that deity. And this statue has recently been bought by this pretentious collector, and what happens is, as the crate is being unloaded off the ship, it turns out the crane operator is drunk off his ass, and this causes a horrific accident where the crate falls on top of the collector's assistant, killing the guy, and the statue is completely destroyed. What happens is this dock worker ends up finding the opal inside the ruins of the statue. He ends up pawning it off, and the guy he sells it to brings it to this auction house. Ultimately, this opal falls into the hands of an appraiser named Alexandra, and Alexandra ends up accidentally releasing the Djinn into the modern world. The Djinn ends up taking on human form and goes out and he starts granting people's wishes, but with every wish he grants, he also gets that person's soul. And in true monkey's paw fashion, every wish granted ends up backfiring on the person who makes the wish in some way, and sometimes in really horrific ways. But the Djinn's ultimate goal is to grant 3 wishes for Alexandra, because if he grants 3 wishes for the person who awoke him, it would allow him to unleash his race upon the earth.
Now, in the film, Andrew Divoff plays the Djinn, or the Wishmaster, and he's freaking awesome in this movie. Honestly, he's 60% of why this movie works as well as it does. Both when he's in makeup in the Djinn form, and when he's out of makeup in his human form, he steals every moment he's on screen. And the Djinn, even though he's pure evil and he's trying to destroy the human race, the Djinn is a strangely likable character, and that's namely because of his sense of humor. Like, Andrew Divoff injects a lot of humor and personality to this performance. I also love that even though he's an ancient Djinn, he seems to become pretty well acclimated to modern society once he's awoken. I particularly like at the end when he's not getting his way, he just says, "Alright, fuck it. If you can't beat 'em, burn them, baby." I also really like the Djinn's look in this movie. Like, he's very regal, but I also like he's wearing sort of this armor that also looks like it could be flesh as well. Like, it looks like it could be a part of his body, but it also, again, kind of looks like it's armor. Like, it almost looks like it's some kind of exoskeleton. He also has these weird antennae coming out of his head. Now, when the Djinn is first reborn into the modern world, he's in sort of this baby form, and the baby Djinn is actually played by Verne, who would go on to play Mini-Me in the Austin Powers movies. Tammy Loring is a fairly likable protagonist as Alexandra, and I like how you can tell the Djinn really does underestimate her, and she's actually a pretty intelligent character, and the way she beats the Djinn at the end is honestly kind of brilliant. Alexandra's sister, Shannon, on the other hand, played by Wendy Benson, yeah, this character kinda sucks. Like, earlier on in the film, after Alexandra's best friend dies, she's of course grieving over this, and Shannon is just freaking chastising her for grieving. Like, seriously, she's a bitch in this movie. I did not like this character at all. The actress did an alright job, but the character I thought the character sucked. Now, for horror fans, there are a lot of familiar faces. You have Robert Englund playing the character of Raymond Beaumont, who is the collector who initially purchased the Horrormasta statue. Of course, Robert Englund is best known for playing Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and I actually got to meet him a few years ago. Very nice guy. And Robert Englund is very good in this movie as this hoity-toity, pretentious asshole. You also have Ted Raimi, who is Sam Raimi's brother, in a brief cameo as Beaumont's assistant. You also have the voice of Angus Scrimm, who is best known for playing the Toll Man in the Phantasm movies, voicing the narrator in the beginning, who's sort of explaining the history of the Djinn. You also have Kane Hodder, who's probably best known for playing Jason in the later Friday the 13th movies as a security guard. You have Tony Todd, who is best known for playing Candyman in a brief cameo, also as kind of a security guard at Raymond Beaumont's party towards the end of the film. You also have Reggie Bannister, who most horror fans would recognize as Reggie from the Phantasm movies, in a brief cameo as this asshole pharmacist who gets into an argument with this homeless guy played by George Buck Flower. Now, George Buck Flower has basically been in everything. Like, he's one of the ultimate that guy actors. Like, he's also shown up in movies like Back to the Future, Pumpkinhead, Puppet Master 2, They Live. Also, the argument argument between George Buck Flower and Reggie Bannister in that scene is so fucking hilarious. You also have Joe Pilato, who most people might recognize as Rhodes from Day of the Dead, as Mickey Torelli, the dock worker whose drinking ends up causing the accident that destroys the statue. But yeah, Wishmaster is a really fun movie, and the script I actually think is relatively well written for the most part. I mean, there are some plot holes and things that don't exactly add up, but I'm willing to forgive things like that. Also, this movie had a $5 million budget, but honestly, for the most part, it actually looks more expensive than it actually was. Like, the effects work in the movie, namely the practical effects, look freaking great. There's some CGI that definitely doesn't hold up that well today. There's also a really unintentionally hokey scene where, okay, so at a certain point in the movie, a guy wishes for $1 million, and then his mother is killed in a plane crash so he can inherit her money, and in the scene where the plane crashes, you literally just see a plane taking off, and then there's an explosion, and it looks like something out of a really bad made-for-TV movie, but once again, besides that, I would say most of the effects work in this film really do hold up well. There's also some, honestly, pretty horrific body horror in this movie. Like, in the beginning, when we're in ancient Persia, the king asks the Djinn to show him wonders, and then all the people at this party that the king is holding just start horrifically mutating. Like, one guy, his intestines becomes this creature. Another guy has his skeleton just burst right out of his body. There's another guy who mutates into a half-human, half-crocodile hybrid. There's a similar sequence towards the end of the film at Raymond Beaumont's party, and you see Raymond Beaumont, Robert Englund's character, puke out this horrific-looking creature. Like, you could tell the movie was directed by a special effects artist, because the practical effects in this movie is freaking masterful. Now, the score for the film was composed by Harry Manfredini, who of course scored most of the Friday the 13th movies, and his score in the film, it's pretty good, but it's also very loud and bombastic and kinda cheesy at points, but in a way that also fits the tone of the movie, because it is, like, it's a great horror film, but it's also a cheesy horror film too. But it's fun, you know, it's a really fun movie.
But yeah, I recommend Wishmaster. It's a really fun late 90s fantasy horror film. Now, the movie spawned 3 sequels, and the Djinn, or the Wishmaster, would go on to become sort of a minor horror icon, despite never becoming quite as popular as characters like Freddy Krueger, Jason, Michael Myers, Chucky, or even Pinhead. There's also a novelization of this movie written by Christian Francis, published in 2021.
Now, because Djinn come from actual folklore, there have been other movies and stories that feature the Djinn. For example, there was an episode of Supernatural where Dean Winchester went up against a Djinn. One of Tobe Hooper's last movies was about an evil Djinn. There's also the 2016 horror film Under the Shadow, which I think is about a mother and her daughter who are haunted by an evil Djinn. I think it was an Iranian film, and I imagine that probably is a lot closer to the actual Djinn folklore than Wishmaster is. There's also that movie Wish Upon from a few years ago, which I don't know if that was specifically about a Djinn, but it did follow that same basic premise of be careful what you wish for.
Now I want to cut to this guy named Joey, who is a follower of my YouTube channel, who asked to take part in some of my reviews. Last year, he took part in some of my Friday the 13th reviews. Well, here's Joey again, giving his thoughts on the first Wishmaster movie.
Wishmaster of 1997 is a cool horror movie. It is about people make wishes and stuff, and it doesn't go well for them. But the effects in this movie were fucking awesome. At the beginning too and stuff, in the middle of the movie, it was really cool. And these people make wishes from this genie, like in this movie, and it's like they pay the price after. It's like, the wishes don't go well for them. It stars Ted Raimi, which is the brother of Sam Raimi. He's the one that directed the Evil Dead movies. It also stars Robert Englund. Also stars George Also, there's a lot of B-movie actors in this movie too that makes it even more cool. Oh, and it also stars Tony Todd too, when she was the one that was in Night of the Living Dead remake, and Candyman and Wishmaster. The first one I have to say was my best out of the series, because most of the time it is. But part 2 and 3 was cool too. But no, I strongly recommend this movie also.
So yeah, that was my review of Wishmaster, and my next movie review will be on Wishmaster 2, Evil Never Dies.